What's up guys, welcome back. This is Anime Crossover. You'll be watching What If Naruto Was the 10 Tails in Transformers Part 4. Now, let's begin. The night and sky Egypt's sands were decorated with wild light from explosions and lasers. Sam Witwicky did not look back. His lungs were on fire, and his legs were screaming in pain. But he gripped the blazing matrix of leadership to his chest and dashed past the Nest defensive perimeter. Ironhide and Ratchet set up a deafening wall of cover fire, blasting away Decepticon protoforms to create a route to the core of the ruins. Optimus Prime's lifeless carcass rested on the charred dirt. Sam landed on his knees, sliding the final few feet. He scrambled atop Optimus' huge chest plate. The air was dense with the odor of ozone and burning metal. "Come on," Sam implored, his voice cracking. He raised the ancient silver and gold dagger. He inserted the matrix of leadership into Optimus Prime's chest, causing a gaping hole. For a horrifying second, nothing occurred. The desert held its breath. The matrix's crystalline core emitted a bright blue light. Genesis energy created a shockwave that blew sand away from the Autobot leader's body. A powerful, repetitive beat could be heard deep within the dead machine. Then another. The gigantic internal gears began to grind, and the broken hydraulic lines reconnected flawlessly thanks to the artifact's divine power. Optimus Prime's optical shutters opened, revealing a bright blue light. The Prime inhaled a large amount of air and engine exhaust. He carefully forced himself up, his heavy metallic joints groaning as the rust of death was brutally expelled from his system. "Boy," Optimus roared, peering down at Sam in complete disbelief. "You returned for me." "We all did," Naruto's voice repeated. Optimus turned his huge head. The king walked through the flames and fire, wearing his beautiful white gold transformium armor. Behind him was a mound of corroded black metal that used to be Jetfire. "My king," Optimus muttered, struggling to get to his feet, but his just rebuilt servos were still weak. Suddenly, the sky darkened over them. A telepathic voice, ancient, icy, and full of venom, pierced the minds of everybody in the desert. "The Matrix is mine." A scary silhouette appeared at the summit of the Great Pyramid of Giza, kilometers away. It was the Fallen. The ancient and treacherous Prime had arrived. He raised his jagged, spear-like staff, causing the immense stone blocks of the pyramid to suddenly peel apart, revealing the horrific, towering metal spire of the Sun Harvester hiding within. Ratchet shouted, "He's activating the machine," as his scanners went berserk. "If he turns that harvester on, our sun will be consumed in minutes." Optimus pushed himself up, his energon swords slid out of his forearms. "I must stop him." Naruto's sapphire optics focused on the mountain of Jetfire's remains. "Jetfire gave his spark so you could fly. It's time to honor his sacrifice." Naruto stood between Optimus and a mound of ancient Decepticon steel. He did not ask Optimus to kneel. He merely lifted both of his white and gold hands. The Allspark roared inside Naruto's chest. He directed the Genesis energy outward, engulfing Jetfire's remains in a confined, anti-gravity field of blazing blue plasma. The hefty, corroded components levitated into the air. "Brace yourself, Optimus," Naruto instructed. "This is going to feel a little heavy." Naruto threw his hands forwards. The old black metal flew towards Optimus Prime. However, it did not just adhere like armor. Naruto used the Allspark to essentially reforge the metal upon contact. The rust burnt away in a burst of blue heat, revealing spotless, highly armed black and silver armor that blended seamlessly with Optimus' red and blue frame. Twin State Route 71 afterburners hooked onto Optimus' back. Heavy rotary cannons placed themselves on his shoulders. His chest and legs were coated with thick, aerodynamic protection. Optimus Prime roared as the ancient Seeker's engines overwhelmed his systems. He stood up, noticeably taller, bulkier, and armed to the teeth. He was Jet Prime. "Let's roll out," Optimus exclaimed, the enormous afterburners on his back erupting with a dazzling blue blaze. Naruto did not stay on the ground. He tapped into his own Jubi density, bending gravity around his white gold boots. He huddled low, the concrete under him shattered. Boom. Naruto propelled himself into the sky like a surface-to-air missile, breaching the sound barrier immediately. Optimus Prime rocketed off alongside him, the deafening scream of his jet engines shaking the ground. The god and his knight raced into the Egyptian sky, leaving twin contrails of blue and white fire as they approached the Great Pyramid, where the Fallen and Megatron were waiting. The Great Pyramid of Giza was tearing itself apart. Over millennia, precisely constructed limestone blocks were violently sheared and flew into the sky, defying gravity. Under the antique exterior, the structure's actual, terrible purpose was revealed: the Sun Harvester. It was a gigantic, jagged spire of dark Cybertronian metal, teeming with massive energy conduits and terrible, star-destroying turbines. The Fallen stood atop the harvester. The ancient, treacherous Prime raised his jagged spear, his flaming red eyes locked on the Egyptian sun blazing down in the desert. "The sun will be extinguished," the Fallen's telepathic voice bellowed, rattling the teeth of humans miles away. "And from its ashes, the Decepticon Empire will rise eternal." Megatron, motivated by rage and seriously damaged, raised his fusion cannon to target two contrails of blue and white fire shooting across the sky toward them. "Intercept them," the Fallen ordered. Megatron unleashed a powerful, dark purple blast, but Jet Prime was already too fast. Optimus yelled, "I'll take him," as his State Route 71 blasted with afterburners. Optimus did not even draw his swords. He merely accelerated, crashing his big, newly armored shoulder into Megatron in the air. The kinetic effect of the archaic Seeker engines, combined with the bulk of a Prime, was catastrophic. Megatron was brutally swatted out of the sky like an insect, crashing down the side of the pyramid in a chaotic avalanche of metal and shattered limestone. However, Optimus was too late to stop the machine. The Fallen plunged their spear into the control console of the Apex. A terrible, apocalyptic buzz echoed throughout the land. The huge turbines of the Sun Harvester came to life. A bright, concentrated beam of dark, antimatter energy burst from the spire's tip, flying straight up into the atmosphere and focusing on the sun. Immediately, the sky darkened, and strange, terrible dusk settled over the desert as the harvester began to physically extract the stellar plasma from the star. Optimus shouted, "No," and fired his rotary cannons at the Fallen, but the ancient Prime simply raised his palm, forming a localized telekinetic shield that easily repelled the hefty shots. Naruto lingered in the air 100 yards away, his white gold armor shrieking as the harvester's gravitational force attempted to drag him into the beam. He looked to the sky. The sun was clearly dimming. A 6-foot structure, no matter how dense, could not deflect a beam of energy intended to consume a star. "I am a protector," echoed in the endless ocean of the Allspark. Naruto did not fly toward the Fallen. He soared directly at the apocalyptic beam of antimatter. "Naruto, no. The thermal load will vaporize you." Carly's voice crackled wildly across the encrypted radio channel in his auditory receptors. Naruto didn't respond. He struck the center of the beam. He didn't try to hold it back as a humanoid. Naruto completely unleashed the 10 tails as the searing heat rushed over his white gold armor. The Jubi's change was more than just an eruption of tails, but a horrifying embodiment of its enormity. A bright sphere of blue Genesis energy spread into the sky. Millions of tons of silver and gold transformium emerged from the emptiness, becoming a symphony of grinding, deafening machinery. The beast absolutely dominated the sky after the blue glow cleared. A massive mechanical leviathan hovered directly over the pyramid's apex. The 10 tails was easily as large as a mountain. Its huge, jagged head housed a single, brilliant blue optical array. Its 10 huge tails coiled around the floating limestone slabs, pinning the unimaginably large beast to the pyramid's remains. The beast's strongly armored chest received the full impact of the Sun Harvester's beam. RAGH. The mechanical roar of the Jubi smashed the sound barrier, booming over the continent. The beast extended its 2 gigantic, clawed front limbs, literally grasping the borders of the antimatter beam. The sheer, localized gravity of the 10 tails served as a cosmic dam, preventing the beam from reaching the sun. The Jubi's silver and gold armor absorbed the blinding radiation, causing the transformium to flare white-hot. However, the beast remained unaffected. The twilight passed, and natural light returned to the desert. The Fallen were terrified when they saw the mechanical god stopping their doomsday. "The Creator." The Fallen muttered, his telekinetic grip weakening. "I rise. You fall." The Fallen did not even have time to turn around. Optimus Prime, driven by Jetfire's ancient engines and the righteous rage of a fallen sibling, descended on the deceitful Prime. Optimus pinned the Fallen to the Harvester's metal pinnacle by driving his glowing orange energon blade into his right shoulder. Before the ancient Decepticon could telekinetically retaliate, Optimus wrenched his other blade upward, completely severing the Fallen's spear hand. "You betrayed your brothers," Optimus yelled, grasping the Fallen by the crest of his jagged helmet. "You betrayed your king." Optimus Prime brutally ripped the Fallen's faceplate from its chassis, exposing the vulnerable neural circuitry underneath. The ancient Prime wailed in agony, emitting pure, glitching static. Optimus did not hesitate. He slammed his fist into the Fallen's exposed chest, his big metal fingers wrapping around the old, dark spark. Optimus crushed it with great effort. The Fallen's red optics have irrevocably died. The ancient, treacherous Prime fell backward, tumbling off the pyramid's edge and smashing into the desert floor miles below, his reign of terror ending forever. When the Fallen died, the Harvester's control console flared and overloaded. The antimatter ray flickered before abruptly cutting out. The huge mechanical 10 tails exhaled superheated steam from above. The mountain-sized beast gradually shrank. Millions of tons of silver and gold transformium collapsed back into the abyss, compressing with incredible speed. The 10 gigantic tails retracted, the jagged armor smoothed out, and the massive Jubi dissolved back into the king's pristine, 6-foot, white gold armor. Naruto fell from the sky, landing on his knees on the metal pinnacle of the destroyed Harvester. His white gold armor was charred black in the center of his chest from resisting the starbeam. He was panting severely, the blue circuitry flickering weakly as the Allspark cooled from the intense exertion. Optimus Prime stepped ahead. The massive, black Jetfire armor hissed as the afterburners turned off. The enormous Autobot leader lowered himself on one knee on the shattered tower and stared down at his king. "The sun is safe, Your Grace," Optimus said proudly. "The Fallen is dead." Naruto gazed up at the hot Egyptian sun and then down at the desert, where his friends waited. He let the white gold armor melt away, and his gray hoodie and t-shirt returned. He gave Optimus a tired, deeply human smile. "Good job, Optimus," Naruto exclaimed. "Now, can we please go home?" The salty, cutting wind of the Mediterranean Sea blew across the enormous flight deck of the USS John C. Stennis. It was 3 days since the Battle of Egypt. The world's governments were in a frantic, classified hurry to explain the abrupt, localized eclipse and collapse of the Great Pyramid, blaming it on an exceptional meteor shower and an unusual seismic catastrophe. On the deck of the nuclear aircraft carrier, the reality was obvious. The surviving Autobots, Ironhide, Ratchet, Bumblebee, and Twins, were tethered along the runway, their armor damaged and battered, but their optics gleaming with relief of triumph. Captain Lennox and his Nest agents were coordinating medical evacuations and debriefings below deck. As the sun fell, the king stood at the ship's bow, overlooking the vast ocean. Naruto donned his signature gray sweater and jeans. He leaned against the massive steel fence, the sea breeze rustling his golden hair. He appeared totally human, except for a faint, constant blue glow that pulsed beneath the fabric of his shirt. He was fatigued to his core, but the Allspark within him felt calm. It felt safe. "You know," a crisp, British voice remarked over the screaming wind. "The thermal output you generated holding back that beam should have completely melted your internal circuitry." Despite his tiredness, Naruto smiled as he turned around. Carly Spencer approached the railing and leaned close to him. She was dressed in an enormous navy jacket, with her blonde hair pulled back in a sloppy ponytail. She didn't appear afraid of him anymore. She looked at him with steadfast devotion, which warmed the Genesis energy in his chest. "I'm built tough," Naruto chuckled quietly. "You're a localized anomaly of theoretical physics," Carly clarified, pressing her shoulder into his. "And you owe me a new set of textbooks. I left mine in the dorm when your crazy stalker tried to murder me." Naruto's laughter echoed across the breeze. "I think the king of Cybertron can afford to buy you some engineering books, Carly." "I'm holding you to that," she said softly. Her emerald eyes met his blue ones, and the galactic conflict vanished into the distance. "You did brilliantly out there, Naruto. You saved us all." Naruto responded, "I didn't do it alone. diverting his attention away from her. Despite his exhaustion, Sam Witwicky emerged from the ship's superstructure with a tray of rationed Navy cafeteria food. He handed Carly a large plate of fries and leaned against the railing on Naruto's side. "I have decided," Sam said as he inhaled a fry, "that for the rest of my college career, the most dangerous thing I am going to do is eat cafeteria sushi. No more giant robots. No more ancient daggers. Just frat parties and bad decisions." "Good luck with that, mate," Carly taunted, nodding at the enormous shadow lurking behind them. Heavy footsteps shook the flight deck. Optimus Prime walked towards the trio. He was no longer simply the red and blue semi-truck. Jetfire's antique, black and silver armor has been seamlessly incorporated into his chassis by Naruto's Genesis energy. Massive thrusters sat placed on his back, while massive cannons rested solidly on his broad shoulders. He appeared majestic, scary, and clearly powerful. Optimus stopped a few feet from the railing and dropped to one knee, bringing his optical visors level with the humans. "Samuel," Optimus said, his booming voice echoing across the water. "You risked everything to bring me back. I owe you my life." "You died for him," Sam remarked, pointing his thumb at Naruto. "And I'd do anything for him too. We're a team, Optimus." Optimus Prime nodded slowly. He moved his focus to Naruto. "My king. Megatron has fled into the far reaches of the galaxy, and the Fallen is no more. But the Decepticon armada is vast. When they realize their master is dead and the creator is awake, they will not stop hunting you." Naruto turned away from the ocean and gazed up at his greatest hero. He didn't resemble a teenager anymore. The weight of the crown was completely settled on his shoulders, but it did not crush him. He felt emboldened. Naruto's voice blended with the Ten Tails' deep bass. "I know," he said. The blue circuitry began to trace up his neck, illuminating the dimly lit deck. "But we aren't going to hide anymore, Optimus." Naruto approached the aircraft carrier's communication tower, putting his bare hand against its huge steel hull. He closes his eyes. He didn't just use the ship's radio. He also used the worldwide satellite network to broadcast the Allspark's divine frequency to every orbital relay on Earth. He amplified the signal and projected it well into space, broadcasting on all known Cybertronian frequencies. "This is Naruto Uzumaki." The king's voice boomed across the cosmos, reverberating across the desolate remains of Cybertron, Saturn's rings, and striking dread into the spark of every lurking Decepticon in the galaxy. "I am the vessel of the Allspark. I am the Ten Tails. I am the king of Cybertron." The carrier's blue glow illuminated the sky like a beacon. "For millions of years, you have fought a war of extinction. You have ravaged our home and sought to conquer others. But that war ends now. I claim this world, Earth, and all its people, as my royal protectorate." Optimus Prime, standing behind him, exuded unwavering pride. Carly and Sam looked in amazement at the god who stood next to them. "If you seek peace, you are welcome in my kingdom," Naruto's broadcast continued, with a tone of overwhelming destruction. "But if you come to this planet with the intent to harm my subjects, I will not send my knights to fight you. I will tear you apart myself. You know my frequency. You know my power." When Naruto opened his eyes, the blazing blue light faded away, revealing the soft blue of a youngster from Nevada. "I am waiting." The broadcast was shut off. The only sound remaining was the smashing of the waves on the hull. Naruto lowered his hand from the communication tower. He looked at Carly, who was beaming with delight, and Sam, who appeared ready to conquer the world. "Well," Naruto groaned, the heavy, holy aura dissipating, leaving only a hungry adolescent in a gray sweatshirt. "Who wants to help me eat Sam's fries?" The Geiger detectors attached to the Nest operative's tactical vests clicked in a rapid, irregular pattern. Pripyat, Ukraine. Chernobyl exclusion zone. The sky was the color of bruised iron, and the air tasted of ash and copper. Rusted Ferris wheels and deteriorating concrete apartment buildings loomed in the dense fog, relics to a human calamity from decades before. However, Nest was not present for human history. They came here because a Ukrainian Department of Energy satellite detected a big, uncontrolled thermal bloom beneath the wreckage of Reactor 4. Captain Lennox, disguised in urban camouflage, lifted a clenched fist. The strike team of 24 elite soldiers came to a halt immediately, their laser sights scouring the fog. The person walking alongside Lennox was not a soldier wearing a hazmat suit. Naruto Uzumaki was 20 years old. 3 years of open combat and ruling the Autobots honed the child into a hardened king. He wore a dark, military-grade tactical jacket but did not carry a rifle. He didn't need a hazmat suit because the Allspark humming continuously beneath his ribs actively purified the ionizing radiation in his immediate proximity, providing a safe, contained bubble for the humans walking behind him. Ratchet said, "Radiation levels are spiking, Your Grace," through the encrypted earpiece. The Autobot medic was stationed 2 miles back, wearing heavy armor. "Whatever is in that facility, it's shielded with heavy Cybertronian alloys." "Copy that, Ratchet," Naruto said calmly, with the authority of an experienced commander. He stared at Lennox. "Move in, but keep your eyes on the ground. The thermal signature isn't in the building, it's under it." They passed through the rusting turnstiles of the abandoned institution. The hush was broken only by the crunch of their military boots against broken glass. They approached the center of the vast turbine hall. In the heart of the debris lay a gigantic, cylindrical piece of extraterrestrial machinery. It was badly corroded, covered in thick cables, and illuminated with a weak, sickly yellow light. Lennox directed his soldiers to spread out. "Eps, get the scanners on that thing." "What are we looking at?" Naruto moved closer. When he neared, the Allspark in his chest tightened. It wasn't a warning about danger, it was a profound, ancient flash of awareness. "It's an engine part," Naruto said, scanning the metal with his optical sensors that turned a pale blue. "But the engineering? It's completely wrong. This isn't Decepticon tech. And it isn't from Optimus's generation either. This is old. Pre-war old." The turbine hall's concrete floor exploded before Epps could connect a diagnostic cable to the item. Boom. The Nest team was unprepared for a localized earthquake. A scary, huge nightmare broke out of the massive crater in the center of the hall. The driller was a massive mechanical device. It resembled a huge, heavily armored metallic sandworm the size of a skyscraper, complete with thousands of spinning, razor-sharp circular saws and grinding mandibles. The driller screamed and lashed a large, serrated tentacle directly at Lennox and Epps. Lennox yelled, "Fall back," and fired his assault rifle into armor meant to penetrate through planetary crusts. Naruto did not withdraw. In a bright burst of blue Genesis energy, his human appearance vanished. The flawless, white-gold transformium armor instantaneously covered his body. He didn't reveal his tails since he didn't need to. He concentrated the Jubi's raw, crushing weight squarely into his iron boots, securing himself to the bedrock. Naruto intercepted the driller's tentacle, preventing it from crushing the soldiers. He sank his fingers into the beast's whirling and razor-sharp armor. The saws screamed and flashed wildly against his white-gold palms, but the king's metal was perfect. With a loud growl, Naruto turned his hips and bodily flung the multi-ton tentacle off course, slamming through the hall's concrete pillars. Naruto commanded, his voice echoing with the 10 tails' resounding resonance. "Get the engine part out of here." But the driller was only a pet. A large figure emerged from the crater's shadows. It was a Decepticon, but unlike any Naruto had previously encountered. His armor was a dark, chilly purple. He carried a gigantic astromag gun on his arm, and his faceplate had no mouth, just a single, searing, emotionless red optical sensor. Shockwave. The Decepticon's most cunning and vicious assassin. Shockwave observed the white gold king holding back his pet. He didn't yell in wrath like Megatron or panic like Starscream. He merely analyzed the variables. "The Sovereign," Shockwave said, his voice a terrifying, synthetic buzz of pure Cybertronian logic. "Your presence was a variable with a 12.4% probability. Engaging you directly without the pillars is illogical." Shockwave aimed his enormous gun and fired. He did not aim at Naruto. Rather, he shot directly at the roof of the aging nuclear reactor. "He's bringing the roof down," Epps exclaimed. A tremendous shower of concrete, steel rebar, and radioactive dust collapsed on the Nest team. Naruto released the driller and threw both fists skyward. He created a large, dome-shaped localized gravity shield that caught hundreds of tons of falling debris perfectly in midair, protecting the humans who were hiding below. Shockwave did not waste the opportunity. He nonchalantly trod on the driller's head. With a mechanical screech, the giant worm dove back into the massive crater, burrowing deep into the soil and disappearing into the subterranean depths of the exclusion zone, leaving only a massive hole. Naruto maintained the gravity shield until Lennox and his team escaped the kill zone. Naruto flung the hundreds of tons of debris securely into the empty crater before dropping the shield. The dust settled. The white gold armor returned to Naruto's tactical jacket and human flesh. He coughed and waved the dust away from his face. Naruto scanned the team, asking, "Is everyone intact?" "We're good, boss," Epps coughed, giving a wobbly thumbs up. But what the hell was that one-eyed freak? Optimus Prime's thundering footfall rattled the broken courtyard outside. The enormous Autobot leader, carrying a newly modified trailer of weaponry, dipped his head to see through the collapsed wall of the turbine hall. Optimus' blue eyes searched the crater and found the oxidized, yellow-glowing engine part that Shockwave had left behind during his retreat. Optimus Prime froze. "Optimus?" Naruto inquired, approaching the artifact. "Do you know what this is?" "This?" Optimus rumbled, his deep voice full of shock and anguish. "This is an engine piece from the Ark." "The what?" Lennox inquired, lowering his firearm. "The Ark was a Cybertronian vessel," Optimus stated, lowering to one knee to investigate the item. "It was commanded by my predecessor, Sentinel Prime. He was the Einstein of our civilization. He carried a technology that could have won the war, but his ship was lost in the cosmos during the final days of Cybertron." Optimus focused on Naruto, his eyes narrowing. "My king," Optimus said, as the severity of the situation settled over them. "This engine part has been here for decades. The humans have kept it hidden from us. They have known about our technology long before Megatron froze in the ice." Naruto clenched his jaw. For 3 years, he had preserved the Earth. He'd signed accords. He had sacrificed his own metallic blood for them. And the Director of National Intelligence had lied to him. Naruto stared at Captain Lennox, his blue eyes icy and uncompromising. "Lennox," Naruto said quietly, "call the Director of National Intelligence. Tell her I am coming to Washington. And tell her she has exactly 5 hours to remember the truth before I take the roof off her building." The Department of National Intelligence's headquarters are in Washington, D.C. It was meant to be one of the most secure structures on the globe. Heavy steel barricades, anti-aircraft batteries, and a tiny army of heavily armed security guards surrounded the perimeter. When the king came knocking, everything else became irrelevant. A big red and blue Peterbilt 379 drove through the front gates, ignoring security guards' panicked yells. Optimus Prime did not slow down. He sped past the checks, his enormous tires screeching as he entered the central, highly secret courtyard. Before the truck came to a complete stop, the driver's side door burst open. Naruto Uzumaki stepped out. He was 20 years old now, his jawline sharper, his shoulders wider, and his blue eyes filled with an intense, unrelenting hardness. He didn't wear his white gold armor, and he didn't have to. The intense, localized pressure of the Allspark emanating from his chest made the air in the courtyard feel heavy, as if it were just before a cyclone. Captain Lennox and Epps jogged behind him, carrying a large, lead-lined case with the engine part recovered from Chernobyl. Lennox yelled into his radio, "Stand down, all units, stand down." As panicked security forces raised their firearms. "Do not engage." Naruto did not even look at the guns. He walked straight through the headquarters' giant glass double doors, the security locks immediately short-circuiting and snapping open as Genesis energy flowed over them. He walked into the underground situation room. Director Charlotte Meering, the Director of National Intelligence, was seated at a large mahogany table. She was a severe, determined woman wearing a crisp gray suit, surrounded by a dozen frenzied military experts. "Your Grace," Meering began, her voice tight, attempting to preserve her authority in her building. "You cannot simply breach a classified federal facility. We have protocols." Slam. Naruto did not speak. He reached back, grabbed the lead-lined case from Lennox, and threw it onto the mahogany table. The hefty metal case splintered the glossy wood, sliding down the middle and halting inches from Miring's chest. The lid flipped open, displaying the badly oxidized, yellow glowing engine cylinder. Miring's face lost its color instantaneously. The military advisors went completely silent. "Protocols," Naruto said gently. His voice did not roar, but the resonant, metallic bass vibrating beneath his words caused the coffee mugs on the table to shake. "For 3 years, I have bled for your planet. I executed the leader of the Decepticons on your soil. I declared your world a protectorate of my crown. I gave you my trust, Director." Naruto made a hesitant stride forward. The illusion of his human skin started to fade. Deep, dazzling blue circuitry raced up his neck, and the perfect, white gold transformium armor rippled briefly on his knuckles. Naruto went on, "And you," his blue eyes narrowing, "have been hiding the technology of my ancestors." Miring swallowed hard. She gazed at the blazing engine part and then at the glowing, eerily peaceful king. "That is secret information from a Soviet nuclear program." "Don't lie to me," Naruto said. Suddenly, the gravity in the room became a lot stronger. The hefty leather chairs creaked, and the invisible strain pulled a few of the advisors to their knees. Shockwave was looking for this. Optimus Prime knew this. This is a part of the Ark's engine. Sentinel Prime was in charge of the Ark. The heavy, mechanical footsteps of Optimus Prime echoed from the courtyard above. The huge Autobot leader looked down through the reinforced skylight of the underground room, his blue eyes fixated on Miring. "Director," Optimus said, his voice shaking the glass. "You made a terrible mistake. Where is the Ark?" Miring gazed at the broken table, her prostrate counselors, and finally understood that gods and titans were much more powerful than people. She gave out a sigh of defeat, and her stiff body began to relax. 1961. Miring murmured as he typed a difficult clearance code into the wall keypad. The huge screens in the Situation Room came to life. They didn't show maps of the Middle East or pictures of Russia seen from space. They exhibited black and white video of space that was blurry. "Something strange crashed on the dark side of the moon," Miring said, her voice shaking a little. "Because of the huge impact, our early communication satellites stopped working. Your Grace, President Kennedy didn't start the Apollo program to beat the Soviets. We did it to look into the crash site." The screens changed to show the famous footage of Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. The feed suddenly shifted to confidential footage that had never been viewed before. The astronauts were walking on the moon's surface when their flashlights lit up a huge, jagged, golden Cybertronian spaceship that was half buried in the dust. "The Ark," Miring admitted, "we spent the next 20 years taking samples. We took the engine piece you found. We tried to figure out how the technology worked so we could win the Cold War. But the ship was dead. We thought it was just a ruin." "It's not a ruin," Naruto said, his eyes wide as he looked at the screens. His Allspark in his chest jumped. It wasn't the painful, violent feedback cycle he had with Sam. It was a weak, very far away pulse. A link. Naruto looked up at the skylight and said, "Optimus. He's alive. I can feel his spark. Sentinel Prime is in stasis lock and is sleeping in the ship's vault." Optimus Prime's optical visors opened wide in shock. "Sentinel. My master. He lives?" Naruto looked back at Miring. The white gold armor disappeared completely, revealing just the determined, unyielding face of a 20-year-old leader who had just found a missing piece of his people's history. "Get the Xantium ready," Naruto said Lennox. He was talking about the substantially modified Autobot spaceship that was buried at Cape Canaveral. "Please wait, Your Grace," Miring begged, summoning a little bit of her bravery. "That big of a space launch in one place will alert every Decepticon spy on the planet. If Shockwave knows the Ark is on the moon," Naruto cut in coldly, "Shockwave already knows," and turned his back on the Director of National Intelligence. "All he has to do is wait for us to open the door." Naruto left the destroyed Situation Room, and the massive glass doors closed behind him. He gazed up at Optimus Prime, who was standing in the courtyard. "Optimus, we're going to the moon," Naruto said. "We're taking your master home." Space was completely quiet. The Xantium, a substantially modified Autobot spacecraft, floated silently above the dark side of the moon, 238,000 miles from Earth. Its engines blazed softly in the vacuum, sending up a huge, slow-moving cloud of gray lunar dust as it landed on the edge of the Mare Tranquillitatis. The ship's hefty loading ramp went down, making a long, bright rectangle of light on the cratered ground. First, Optimus Prime and Ratchet stepped down. Their huge metal feet made no noise at all in the abyss. A much smaller figure pursued them, but it had a strength that was stronger than the ship behind them. Naruto did not wear a suit for space travel. As soon as the airlock opened, his human form dissolved away, leaving only his perfect, white-gold transformium armor. The Genesis energy inside his chest flared brighter than ever in the lunar vacuum, which was at absolute zero. The blue wires that ran up his arms and chest pulsed with a steady, self-sustaining pace. He didn't require oxygen since the Allspark created an endless, internal environment that protected his biological matrix from the deadly radiation of the universe. He walked down the ramp, and the old gray dust sucked his boots down an inch. "Comms check. Do you read me, Your Grace?" Ratchet's voice crackled over the encrypted radio channel. Naruto said, "I hear you, Ratchet," and his voice echoed clearly in his internal auditory receptors. He raised his head. The stars were a brilliant, endless tapestry of diamond dust without the Earth's atmosphere to scatter the light. And there, in the black vacuum, was the huge, delicate, blue and green marble of his home. He didn't look for long. There was a ghost ship front of them, half buried in the edge of a huge crater. The Ark was huge, like a jagged, golden knife from ancient Cybertronian architecture. It was as big as a metropolis. It had crashed into the Moonhead on a long time ago, and its massive armor plating was bent and scarred from a terrible battle before it died. "The structural integrity is severely compromised," Optimus Prime said as he looked over the huge devastation. The astronauts from Earth explored the outer decks, but they didn't have the tools to get into the main vault. "If my master is still alive, he is in there." Naruto was in charge. Because of the moon's low gravity, he jumped forward in huge, smooth jumps that took only seconds to traverse the distance. They got to the Ark's central vault, where the huge, locked blast doors were. The gold metal was fused shut, and it was entirely dead. Ratchet went forward and pulled a large plasma cutter out of his forearm, but Naruto stopped him. "Don't waste your energy, Ratchet. We don't know what's in there." Naruto walked up to the huge doors. He used the dormant Jubi energy to push the gravity outwards. Two black spheres of transformium appeared over his shoulders and stretched out into his distinctive 4-foot-long energy blades. The borders were on fire with superheated blue plasma that was so bright it hurt to look at. In the quiet of the vacuum, Naruto crossed his swords and slammed them straight into the old gold metal. The creator's swords had no trouble getting through the Ark's blast doors. Naruto pulled the blades down, making a huge, glowing red X in the metal. He stepped back, turned off his swords, and kicked the middle of the cross with a powerful kick that made the gravity stronger. The doors, which weighed several tons, collapsed in on themselves and floated away into the dark hallway beyond. Naruto, Optimus, and Ratchet went into the vault. Naruto's blue armor lit up the huge space. It was a graveyard of old technology. Hundreds of huge, metallic cylindrical pillars were hanging in the middle of the chamber, held in seriously broken stasis pods. "By the Maker," Ratchet said in shock. "The pillars." Naruto said, "What are they?" as he looked at the weird, dormant technology. Optimus said, "Space bridge technology," his voice full of wonder. "Designed to instantly teleport matter across the cosmos. It was Sentinel Prime's greatest invention. With these, we could have won the war. We could have saved Cybertron." But Naruto's eyes were pulled to the back of the vault, beyond the pillars. A huge, tall Autobot was resting on an elevated dais, surrounded by broken life support wires. His armor was a dull, rusty red and silver color. His eyes were entirely black, and his body was stuck in the stiff, gray state of a deep stasis lock. "Sentinel," Optimus said as he ran forward and dropped to one knee next to his fallen master. Optimus reached into his own chest, and the armor opened up to show the glowing, crystal matrix of leadership that Sam and Naruto had found in Egypt. Optimus took the old key and held it over Sentinel's spark chamber, which was not working. Optimus whispered softly, "Only the power of a Prime can bring him back to life." He stabbed the matrix into Sentinel's chest. For a scary moment, the vacuum stayed dead and quiet. Then, Sentinel Prime's chest bent back with a lot of force. A flash of blue energy came from the old Autobot. Sentinel's optical shutters sprung open, sending out a panicked, scared blue glow. He didn't wake up in a calm way. He woke up in the middle of a frantic, end-of-the-world fight, just like when he went into stasis. Sentinel Prime surged forward with a quiet howl of fear. He tackled Optimus hard, pinning his former student to the deck of the Ark. Sentinel pulled out a huge, double-bladed rust cannon and pointed it right at Optimus's skull. "Sentinel! Stop!" Optimus yelled over the radio, refusing to hit his master back. "It's Optimus. You're safe." Sentinel's frenzied optics came into focus. He gazed at the red and blue armor, the faceplate, and gently put down his gun. "Optimus." Sentinel's old, tired voice crackled over the radio. "The ship. We were attacked. Cybertron." Optimus gently helped the old Prime to his feet and stated, "We are far from home, old friend. You've been asleep for a long time. The war is over. Megatron is hiding, and you have been found." Sentinel glanced around the broken vault, his shoulders drooping. But then he saw the little, 6-foot-tall man standing behind Optimus. Sentinel's eyes were drawn to Naruto's perfect white gold armor, the deep blue circuitry, and the bright, endless flow of Genesis energy that came from his chest. The ancient Prime's optical shutters opened wide in pure, unadulterated horror. His hands, which were covered in rust and heavy, started to shake. Sentinel murmured, "The Allspark," as he stepped past Optimus, his huge body towering over the youngster. "It has a vessel. The prophecies, the dynasty, they were all true." Naruto gazed up at Cybertron's famous Einstein. The king said, "I am Naruto Uzumaki," and his voice echoed with total power over the air. "Welcome back to the real world, Sentinel." Sentinel Prime, a legendary figure who was respected by all Autobots in the galaxy, didn't think twice. He fell to his knees, and the deck of the Ark shook from the impact. He bent his huge head in complete respect for the bride teen. Sentinel whispered, "My king, please forgive my violent awakening. I am your humble servant. It is a miracle to see the Creator's heart beating in the flesh." Naruto said softly, "Stand up, Sentinel. We're bringing you to Earth so you can help us rebuild." When Sentinel stood up, Optimus moved forward and put a hand on his master's shoulder. The knights and kings came together in a beautiful, victorious way. But as Naruto turned to go back to the Xantium, Sentinel Prime stayed in the shadows for a split second. The old Prime stared at the pillars that were sleeping around them. And for a split second, the blue light in his eyes flared with deep, dark, painful guilt. A shadow of a secret that had been hidden on the moon for a reason. "Yes, Your Grace," Sentinel said softly over the radio as he followed the king into the lunar dust. "We have a lot to fix." The Autobot convoy's huge, loud tires made the tarmac of Interstate 66 look like a gray torrent. They were getting back to strongly reinforced DC from the safe nest landing zone in record time. Headquarters. Optimus Prime led the way, his red and blue body shining in the bright sun. Ironhide, Bumblebee, and Sentinel Prime, the newest member of the royal court, followed him. Sentinel Prime had scanned a huge, red and black Rosenbauer Panther fire truck as his Earth alt mode. Naruto sat in the driver's seat of Optimus Prime's big, leather-lined cab. He looked like a person, with a gray hoodie, pants, and a look out the window. But his mind wasn't at ease. There was a low, annoying thrum coming from the Allspark in his chest. "Your Grace," Optimus's voice came through the cabin speakers in a low rumble. "You're upset. I can feel the Genesis energy changing. Something is wrong, Optimus," Naruto said quietly, his blue eyes narrowing as he observed the civilian traffic move out of the way for their loud sirens. "Shockwave left that engine part at Chernobyl on purpose. He wanted us to go to the moon and bring Sentinel back." The encrypted Nest radio network went crazy with static before Optimus could come up with a response. "Vanguard, this is Ironhide. Get in touch with the rear. 3 bogies are coming up fast. They aren't ours." Naruto looked at the huge side view mirror. 3 pitch black, heavily armored Chevrolet Suburban SUVs were weaving wildly through the civilian traffic behind the convoy. They weren't simply speeding. They were driving like predators, breaking the laws of physics as they pushed civilian automobiles out of the way, their engines shrieking with a terrible, alien sound. The Dreads. Megatron's savage, elite hunting group. Naruto yelled, "They're going for Sentinel," and his human disguise melted away right away. The white gold transformium moved across his skin, and the blue circuitry came to life. "Optimus, keep the convoy moving. Don't stop, King. You can't fight them at this speed." Optimus yelled, pushing his speed beyond 100 miles per hour and revving his engine even higher. "Watch me," Naruto said. He didn't let her in. He pushed the Jubi's localized gravity into his boots, making him much denser. Naruto kicked the hefty driver's side door off its hinges with a huge hydraulic kick. The highway's screaming wind hit him like a cyclone. Naruto jumped out of the moving semi-truck. He didn't fall on the road. Instead, his gravity-anchored boots smacked onto the hood of a speeding civilian flatbed truck in the adjacent lane, making a dent in the metal but keeping him perfectly balanced. Crankcase, the lead Dread, observed the King join the fight from 100 yards away. At 100 miles per hour, the black SUV changed violently. It was a scary, jagged black metal monster with massive, spiked blasters and cables that looked like dreadlocks coming out of its head. Crankcase struck the ground on all fours and skated across the highway on heavy metal treads, tearing up the road behind him. The second Dread, Hatchet, a huge, four-legged mechanical wolf, jumped onto the roof of a minivan that was passing by and crushed it right away. Then it jumped straight toward Naruto. "Ironhide, get the civilians out of the way." Naruto cried above the howling wind. Ironhide, a few car lengths ahead, smoothly switched to his bipedal state and skated backward down the highway. "With pleasure, Your Grace," he yelled, unleashing his massive cannons to blow the Dread's missiles out of the sky. Hatchet came down on the flatbed truck, and his huge, vicious jaws snapped open to rip Naruto in half. Naruto didn't move. He threw his hands out, and two black transformium energy swords appeared. The blue plasma edges buzzed with heat that was so strong it hurt. Naruto moved out of the way of the mechanical wolf as it fell with dizzying speed. He swung his right sword up in a perfect, deadly uppercut arc. The superheated plasma cut through Hatchet's massive front leg with no trouble at all, cutting it off completely. Hatchet screamed in pain, his voice full of static, and he ran past Naruto. The beast fell forcefully off the flatbed truck, falling onto the asphalt in a shower of orange sparks and screaming metal. It skidded right into the path of the third Dread, Crowbar. Crowbar turned to escape his falling packmate and changed into his tall, spiky, two-legged form. He pulled out two huge, jagged spears and threw them at Naruto like missiles. Naruto didn't move out of the way. He used the Ten Tails' raw power to send a localized pulse of anti-gravity outward. The huge spears hit the invisible wall of Genesis energy 10 feet away from Naruto and halted in midair, floating harmlessly over the highway. Naruto turned off his left blade, reached out with his white gold hand, and grabbed one of the Decepticon spears that were floating around. He easily turned the huge weapon in his hand and locked his bright blue eyes on Crowbar. "Fetch," Naruto said. Naruto threw the spear back with a scary burst of hydraulic power. The projectile went faster than sound. It spanned the space between the fast cars in a split second, going right through Crowbar's chest plate. The kinetic force was so strong that it lifted the big Decepticon completely off his feet and pinned him to the concrete pillar of an oncoming overpass with a loud crunch. Two Dreads are gone. One is left. The crankcase roared in anger as it skated up next to the flatbed truck. The huge Decepticon pounced and grabbed the edge of the trailer with his large, clawed hands. He tried to flip the whole thing over to crush the King. As the truck tipped over, Naruto jumped into the air. He fell straight down toward Crankcase, holding his last energy blade aloft. But then a huge red and black blur stopped the descent. Sentinel Prime changed from his fire truck shape and tackled Crankcase in the air. The old Prime slammed his massive shield against the Dread's faceplate, knocking him hard onto the ground. Naruto landed next to Sentinel with grace, his boots scraping across the roadway. He raised his sword, preparing to kill the Decepticon who was fighting back. "Wait! Spare him, Your Grace!" Sentinel Prime screamed, putting his huge palm in front of Naruto to stop him. Naruto stopped moving, and the blue plasma of his sword hummed just inches from Crankcase's neck. He peered up at Sentinel, and his optical sensors got smaller as he tried to figure out what was going on. Sentinel, he is an assassin. He just tried to kill innocent people. Sentinel easily corrected, he is a prisoner of war, his old voice full of a peculiar, frantic desperation. We need to question him. We need to know what Megatron is up to. Don't let your divine power get in the way of your mercy, my king. Naruto looked at the old Prime. Once more, the Allspark throbbed wildly in his chest. The logic was good, but there was something very wrong with Sentinel's optics. Before Naruto could say anything, a lot of heavily armed Nest helicopters flew over the highway and dropped steel cables and large magnetic nets. Captain Lennox's soldiers moved in and put heavy stasis restraints on the badly damaged crankcase to keep it safe. There were wrecked automobiles and burned asphalt all over the route, but the convoy made it through. Optimus Prime and Ironhide changed and walked over to where Naruto and Sentinel were. Ironhide said, "A perfect defense, Your Grace," as his cannons smoked. He kicked a piece of Decepticon debris off the road. These punks thought they could take on the Creator in the open. Naruto turned off his energy blade. The black metal melted back into his spine. He stared to Sentinel Prime, who was looking down at the caught Dread with an expression that was impossible to read. Naruto told Lennox to secure the prisoner in a tense voice. Take him to the Nest Vault. We have a lot of questions. Naruto gazed up into the sky as the Nest agents pulled the raging Decepticon away. The ambush wasn't meant to kill anyone. The Dreads were aware that they couldn't kill him. They were pushing them together. They wanted Sentinel to be within the very protected Nest headquarters. Naruto had just opened the entrance door. The underground vault of the Nest headquarters in Washington, D.C. was a stronghold. Heavy titanium blast doors secured the huge room where the recovered space bridge pillars were kept safe. Ironhide stood in the middle of the chamber, and the big cannons on his back were humming with a low, idle charge. He seemed at ease, entirely at home as the Autobots expert in heavy weapons. Naruto stood a few steps away, leaning on the catwalk railing. The human illusion was fully dispelled. He was wearing his full white gold transformium armor, with vivid blue circuitry snaking over his chest plate. However, the light wasn't steady, it was flickering. The Allspark was churning fiercely inside him, sending primordial, hard-coded warnings through his oral receptors. You're pacing, Your Grace, Ironhide said with a mechanical sneer in his voice. The Dreads are locked up. Sentinel is safe. The pillars are secure. Take a breather. Something isn't right, Ironhide, Naruto whispered, touching his white gold chest. The Dreads on the highway. They were hurting us. They wanted us to bring Sentinel into this specific room. The vault doors hissed, and giant gears turned to allow access. Sentinel Prime entered the room. The ancient, red and black Titan walked with a heavy, determined step. He held his big, double-bladed sword on his back, but his right hand was perilously close to his hip. Optimus Prime followed closely after, his optical visors shining with admiration for his former master. The pillars are all accounted for, Sentinel, Optimus triumphantly stated. With these, and the power of the Creator, we can finally heal what is left of Cybertron. Sentinel paused in the middle of the room. He examined the hundreds of inactive metal pillars before moving on to Ironhide and Naruto. The ancient Prime's optics were black, lacking of the veneration he displayed on the moon. We were gods once, Optimus, Sentinel said with a terrifying, empty echo. On Cybertron, we ruled the cosmos. Here, we hide in the shadows of insects. We shed our blood to protect a race of fragile, fleeting organics. Naruto stood up straight, his Jubi instincts on high alert. Sentinel. What are you talking about? Sentinel Prime gently turned his huge head towards the king. I made a deal, Your Grace, Sentinel said, his tone remorseless. To save our world, I had to agree to an alliance with Megatron. Optimus processors stalled due to the impossible statement. Sentinel. No. The humans will be our labor, Sentinel stated, his palm darting to his hip. And their planet will be the foundation of a new Cybertron. Sentinel Prime quickly pulled out his cosmic rust cannon. It was a terrible, jagged weapon created during the darkest days of the conflict. He didn't aim at Optimus or the king. He aimed directly toward Ironhide's back, preparing to execute the most powerful threat in the room. Sentinel pulled the trigger. Bang! The discharge sounded like a horrible screaming wail. A concentrated sphere of highly corrosive, red-black plasma ripped through the room. Ironhide had little time to turn his head, he could not avoid it. But Naruto could. The 10 tails' gravity expanded outward. Naruto moved quicker than the human eye could see, distorting the physical distance between the catwalk and the middle of the room. He materialized right in front of Ironhide. Naruto didn't have time to activate his tails or shield. He merely spread his arms wide, putting his body between the executioner's sword and his knight. The cosmic rust blast hit Naruto directly in the center of his chest. The blast threw Naruto hard backward against Ironhide. The chemical reaction, more than the impact, was horrifying. Cosmic rust can quickly consume Cybertronian metal, reducing armor to fragile dust. When the red-black plasma met Naruto's perfect, white-gold transformium, a painful hiss resonated throughout the vault. Naruto screamed, "Arg!" in agony, causing the glass fixtures in the room to shatter. The chest plate's white-gold metal oxidized rapidly. Jagged, scarlet, corroded veins quickly spider-webbed across his armor, consuming the deep blue circuitry. The Allspark flashed, the Genesis energy frantically attempting to cleanse the infection, but the sheer toxicity of the rust outweighed his targeted healing. "No!" Ironhide yelled in panic, catching his falling king. Optimus Prime's shock turned to apocalyptic anger. He pulled his brilliant orange energon swords, his optical visors blazing with a ferocious rage he had never displayed before. "You dare strike the Creator?" Optimus shouted, charging his erstwhile master. Sentinel Prime maintained his composure. He swung his gigantic, double-bladed sword, using thousands of years of combat training to deflect Optimus's ferocious assault. The impact of their blades generated a shockwave of sparks throughout the vault. "He is a child playing with the power of gods," Sentinel shot back, kicking Optimus in the chest for distance. "And you have lost your way, Optimus." Sentinel did not stay to fight. He snatched the glowing master control pillar from the center of the dais. He fired his cosmic rust cannon at the ceiling, causing a giant, gaping hole in the titanium roof of the subterranean headquarters, revealing the DC sky above. The Wicked Prime used his rockets to hurl himself through the roof, retreating into the city with the key to transport the Decepticon army to Earth. The vault fell silent but for the king's terrible, rasping breaths. Naruto was on his knees and gripping his chest. The scarlet, flaky rust spread outward from the collision zone, devouring the Jubi's impregnable armor. The blue light of the Allspark flickered furiously, fighting an internal war against decay. Optimus dropped his swords and kneeled beside Naruto, his big metal hands hovering hopelessly over the rotting armor. "Ironhide, get Ratchet, now!" Optimus screamed, his deep voice breaking with panic. He stared down at the youngster who had just saved his weapons specialist's life. "Hold on, my king. The Genesis energy will purge it. You must focus. It burns." "Optimus," Naruto muttered, his blue eyes fading to a frightening pale gray. For the first time since awakening the Allspark, the king of Cybertron appeared genuinely, mortally weak. Chicago's skyline was a beauty of glass and steel, glittering in the afternoon sun. But inside aerospace entrepreneur Dylan Gold's enormous, multi-million-dollar apartment, the air was suffocatingly frigid. Carly Spencer stood frozen by the floor-to-ceiling windows, her green eyes wide with a frightening conclusion. "You're insane," Carly muttered, her voice shaking with hatred rather than terror. Dylan Gould stood across the room, pouring himself a tumbler of fine scotch. He wore a nicely fitted suit and appeared every inch the charming CEO, but his eyes were completely dead. Dylan said, "I'm a pragmatist, Carly," and took a sip. "My father helped the government hide the Ark in the 70s. But he also knew that betting against a race of immortal, warmongering machines was a bad financial decision. The Decepticons don't want to destroy us, they just want to hire us." Carly pulled backward as her mind raced. "You've been feeding them our satellite codes. You gave Soundwave access to the orbital network so Sentinel could hide the pillars. And now, the real work begins," Dylan smiled, pointing out the window. The air over the Chicago River distorted severely. A thunderous, mechanical boom broke the glass of surrounding skyscrapers. Sentinel Prime stood on the top of a bridge, his huge rust cannon lifted to activate the master control pillar. A powerful blue energy beam created a gigantic wormhole in space. Carly gazed in terror as the sky over Chicago ripped open. Massive, jagged Decepticon warships began pouring out of the space bridge, blocking the light. Hundreds of heavily armed protoforms descended from the ships, crashing into the streets below and started fire on fleeing citizens. "Welcome to the new management," Dylan stated coldly. "Soundwave is securing the perimeter of this building. You are going to sit on that very expensive couch, Carly, and you are going to be a good little hostage. Because if the king wants his queen back, he has to come to me." Dylan strode out of the penthouse, locking the hefty security doors behind him with a solid bang. Carly was alone. The city beneath her was ablaze. She approached the reinforced door and pressed her ear to the steel. She could hear the heavy, metallic shifting of Soundwave right outside the penthouse. There was no physical way out, but Carly was an engineer. She understood exactly who she belonged to. "I'm not waiting on a couch," Carly said, her British accent cutting with determination. She turned and gazed at Dylan's apartment. It was outfitted with the most sophisticated, high-end technology money could buy. Massive flat-screen screens, massive server racks for his private trade network, and a cutting-edge orbital communications system. Carly did not hesitate. She pulled a hefty bronze statue from the sofa table and smashed it against the screen of a $50,000 television. She started tearing cables out of the wall. She stripped the copper wiring with her teeth, getting beyond Dylan's server's encrypted firewalls. She carried the massive communication array to the shattered window, exposing it to the open, smoke-filled air of Chicago's cityscape. Her hands moved with incredible accuracy. She was rewiring the broadcast frequency while neglecting human bandwidths. She was creating a localized, high-yield distress beacon. "Come on, Naruto," Carly thought, pulling the final copper wires together. "Listen for me." The situation in the subterranean medical facility of the Nest headquarters in DC was critical. Naruto lay on a big, reinforced steel operation table. The white-gold transformium armor on his chest was a horrible, bubbling mess of red rust. Ratchet was working feverishly, using high-intensity plasma torches to practically burn the contaminated metal away, attempting to keep the cosmic rust from reaching the king's spark. Ratchet cried, "Hold him down," above the screeching of the torches. "The rust is fighting back, it's actively consuming the Genesis energy." Ironhide and Bumblebee forcibly pinned Naruto's arms to the table. Naruto was struggling, his optical sensors alternating between blazing blue and dead, pale gray. The pain was unlike anything he had ever experienced. It was the sensation of his own soul being oxidized. Optimus Prime stood over the table, his hands clenched and powerless. He had drawn his sword, intending to sever the contaminated armor himself, but the rust was too close to the Allspark. "Naruto, stay with us," Optimus said, his voice cracking. "You are the creator. Do not let this poison take you." Naruto's vision was dimming. The excruciating fire in his chest had extended to his limbs. The Jubi's immense, confined gravity fluctuated dramatically, shattering medical equipment and cracking the room's walls. He was losing control. But then, over the deafening cacophony of static and suffering, a minuscule, extremely compressed frequency penetrated his aural sensors. It was a magnificent, untidy, and frantic signal made from stripped copper and orbiting servers. It was broadcasting at a frequency that only the Allspark could hear. "Naruto. Chicago. The sky is open. I am here." Naruto's eyes sprung open. His optics went from faint, dying gray to a brilliant, undiluted, violent blue. He stopped screaming in pain. He yelled angrily. The Allspark inside his chest erupted rapidly, engulfing his entire body with an overwhelming amount of Genesis energy. The gravitational field around him flipped. The overwhelming surge of force threw Ratchet, Ironhide, and Bumblebee backward off the table. The white gold armor spewed rust rather than healing it. The sick red-black metal on his chest broke like a bomb, leaving a bright, jagged gash of exposed blue circuitry above his heart. It was no longer pure, it was raw, unpredictable, and horrifying. Naruto sat up on the steel table, his chest heaving and blue plasma leaking into the air around him. The king was no longer indestructible, but the anguish had left, leaving only an apocalyptic, icy wrath. Optimus Prime was taken aback by the boy's tremendous might and cautiously rose to his feet. "My king," Optimus whispered. Naruto hissed, "Chicago," as the Ten Tails' thunderous bass vibrated the entire base. He stared down at his scarred, flaming chest, then up at his most powerful knight. "Sentinel took the city," Naruto commanded, his eyes flashing with blue fire. "He took my queen. We are going to take them back, and we are going to kill them all." Chicago was a stronghold made of twisted metal and flaming ashes. Heavy armed Decepticon fighter ships patrolled the city's airspace in tight, aggressive grids. On the streets, gigantic Decepticon bruisers and hundreds of infantry protoforms guarded strongly built blockades. Sentinel Prime's space bridge continued to whirl in the upper atmosphere, gradually bringing Cybertron's dead, metallic husk into orbit around Earth. They anticipated a big frontal military assault. They were observing the skies. They were watching the roadways. They weren't viewing the Chicago River. The river, 10 miles from the city, was quiet and murky. But 40 feet beneath the surface, a huge, quiet procession was marching toward the heart of the Decepticon occupation. Optimus Prime, Ironhide, Bumblebee, and Ratchet trudged along the silty riverbank. Captain Lennox, Epps, and 24 elite nest agents wearing rebreathers and waterproof combat gear clung to the Autobots' huge, armored shoulders. The king led the underwater vanguard. Naruto did not require a rebreather. His white-gold transformium armor cast a harsh, volatile blue light across the dark, murky sea. Ratchet had burned away the cosmic rust, leaving a large, jagged gash on his chest that pulsed with raw, unshielded Genesis energy. It resembled a bleeding star trapped behind his armor. Normally, 4 gigantic Cybertronians traveling down a river would generate significant surface swells, alerting Soundwave's orbital sensors. Naruto wasn't simply walking. His arms were extended, his blue optics shining brightly as he channeled the Ten Tails' pure, terrible mass. He was projecting a large, confined gravitational field around the whole Autobot strike force. He was physically compressing the water around them, preventing it from shifting outward, effectively canceling away their kinetic and thermal fingerprints. "We are approaching the Michigan Avenue Bridge," Ironhide said through encrypted underwater communications. Multiple heavy Decepticon signatures detected directly above us. Naruto glanced up through the murky waters. He could see the dark outlines of 3 gigantic Decepticon executioners walking across the bridge overhead, their heavy cannons searching the empty streets. "Soundwave's transmission is coming from the high-rise half a mile north," Optimus said, his huge blue optics shining in the black ocean. "That is where they are holding your queen, your grace." Naruto's command, "Get ready to breach," echoed through the water like a depth charge. Naruto squatted low on the riverbed, muck whirling around his white gold boots. He clenched his fists, drawing the immense, compacted gravity inside and coiling the river's physical pressure like a massive, aquatic spring. The Autobots drew powerful weaponry. Lennox and his men switched off the safety on their waterproof assault rifles, cementing their grasp on the gigantic robot's armor. Naruto hissed, "I'm going up." He violently threw his arms up, freeing the localized gravity well. The consequence was a catastrophic eruption that shattered physics. The Chicago River not only splashed, but burst. A large, localized geyser of highly pressurized water, mud, and kinetic force erupted 100 feet into the air, instantaneously breaking the Michigan Avenue Bridge. The 3 Decepticon executioners on the bridge did not have time to recognize the threat. The concrete beneath their feet exploded, propelling them violently into the air. Before the Decepticons could collapse, Optimus Prime emerged from the roaring column of water. The Autobot leader's jetpack ignited with a blue flame, turning the river water into steam. Optimus pulled his blazing orange energon sword in midair, severing the first falling Decepticon in half before landing hard on the shattered street. Ironhide and Bumblebee emerged from the surf seconds later, their cannons already spinning. A thundering assault of plasma fire burst through the Decepticon barricades along the riverwalk, annihilating the enemy forces in a hail of gunfire and splintered concrete. Lennox and the nest agents descended from the Autobots' shoulders and took cover behind abandoned cars, laying down precise suppressive fire. The ambush was brilliant, violent, and totally devastating. The most horrifying sight appeared last. Naruto did not jump. He gently levitated out of the boiling, steaming river, the water aggressively repelling from his scarred, white gold armor due to the heat of his exposed Genesis energy. He fell on the shattered asphalt of Wacker Drive, the blue light from his chest spreading long, jagged shadows across the battlefield. A surviving Decepticon bruiser, a gigantic, heavily armored Cyclops, emerged from the bridge rubble. It roared and wielded a gigantic gravity hammer to crush the Blazing King. Naruto did not even reveal his weapons. He raised his right hand, his blue optics focusing on the beast with an expression of pure, undiluted executioner rage. He tightened his fist. The gravity around the enormous Decepticon increased exponentially. The beast did not fall, but was forcefully and horrifyingly crushed by its own great weight. Its massive armor collapsed and its internal struts snapped like twigs, reducing the 40-foot monster to a dense, sparking cube of scrap metal little larger than a compact car. The battlefield was calm, except for the crackling of fires and the heavy, dripping water from the Autobot armor. Optimus Prime approached Naruto, his blade humming. "The perimeter is secured, my king." As Naruto lowered his hand, his scarred chest heaved slightly. He stared up to Dylan Gold's apartment, a towering glass and steel skyscraper half a mile away. "Lennox, Ironhide, hold this intersection. Do not let any Decepticon reinforcements cross the river," Naruto said, his voice resonating with the terrible, deep bass of a wounded deity. He looked at Optimus and Bumblebee. "We're going to the penthouse. We're getting Carly. Stay tuned for more." Thank you for taking the time to listen to this video. I'm thrilled you watched the video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe for even more exciting content coming your way soon.